In the vast lore of the internet, the Timecube stands out not just as a bizarre curiosity, but as a window into something deeper. A human story about obsession, creativity, and the desire to find cosmic order. When I first stumbled across Gene Ray's Timecube website in the 2000s, it felt like opening a door into someone's fevered mind. Pages of a giant colored text, never-ending paragraphs, declarations that seemed impossible to parse. But behind all the chaos was a life and a mission. Otis Eugene Ray wasn't just some anonymous troll. He was an 87-year-old retired electrician from Alabama who spent decades in Florida, crafting inventions and even advocating for marbles tournaments. He had patents to his name, a playful philosophy about marbles and spheres, and once convinced his city to declare a week of marbles in the 1970s. All of that led, over years of frustration and fascination with circles and pyramids, to the creation of the Timecube theory in 1997. Ray's journey to Timecube began humbly. By trade a master electrician, he tinkered with gadgets and threw himself into unusual projects. In the 1980s, he became known locally for marbles. He published a book called Mr. Marbles, Marbles for Everyone, and even proposed $1 million marble tournament inside a giant transparent sphere, calling it an order of the sphere to save humanity from an unsustainable pyramiding society. But it illustrates how Ray saw meaning in shapes and games. He believed civilization was stuck in pyramid schemes of religion and progress, and he championed the circular mobile idea of a marble game as a solution. Ironically, that circle-loving phase flipped later. He came to scorn circles as zero value once he embraced Timecube. But his marbles days show a constant quest. Ray was trying to find a simple metaphor for how the world works, whether with marbles or time. By the late 90s, Ray felt increasingly marginalized. He'd tried to share his ideas on early internet message boards, but found himself banned and ignored. In 1997, frustrated but determined, he bought a domain and launched Timecube.com, a personal website with no navigation except one very long page. That was the origin story of Timecube, a one-man publication where he poured out his theory of everything. Unlike a polished blog, it was raw and frenetic. Ray's background, electrician, amateur inventor, marble enthusiast, didn't hint at grand cosmology, but on that page he claimed a level of insight beyond any academic. He repeatedly announced himself the wisest man on Earth, a godlike being, able to prove harmonic cosmology while accusing universities of plotting against him, and he meant it. He offered $1,000 to anyone who could disprove his theory. $10,000 to scholars. As the site grew, it became infamous. There was no structure, just blocks of text in garish colors, some diagrams, and endless unique jargon like cubelessness and devilishness. Readers wandered in bewilderment. Ray's prose barreled on in all caps, unleashing breathless declarations that all modern physics and science were conspiracies against the truth, that Greenwich time was a global evil scam, that a psychiatrist once diagnosed him with schizophrenia because his wisdom antiquates known knowledge. The core claims of Timecube are centered on this bold, literal idea. In Ray's model, each single rotation of the Earth doesn't just create one day, it creates 4 simultaneous days. He breaks a day into 4 corners or time segments: sun up, midday, sundown, and midnight. Picture the Earth with 2 major points on opposite sides. Midday, where the sun is overhead, and midnight on the dark side. According to Ray, where those 2 meet and interact, they spawn 2 more points, sun up and sun down. So you have 4 equidistant time corners around the globe, forming what he calls a time square inscribed on the circle of the Earth. Now here is where it gets mathematically crunchy. Ray says when the Earth rotates once, each of these 4 corners will traverse through each of the other 3 corners. In his counting, that process creates 16 corner points, which he somehow equates to 96 hours and 4 simultaneous 24-hour days within one rotation. In other words, instead of one 24-hour day per spin, he saw 4 24-hour days interwoven into each rotation. He often illustrated this with a kind of improvised geometry. Imagine the Earth as a circle and place 4 points on it at 90-degree intervals. These points, sun up, midday, sundown, midnight, form a perfect square if you connect them. If you then rotate that square 1/4 turn, the point that was at midday moves to where sun up was, and so on, cycling the corners. Ray treated each quarter turn as if it generated a new day. In modern mathematical language, you could compare this to the idea of rotational symmetry of a square. A rotation by 90 degrees is a symmetry operation, a member of the cyclic group of order 4. But in mathematics, when we rotate a square by 90 degrees, the square looks the same as before. We haven't created new squares, we've just moved the same square. Similarly, if we take a 24-hour clock and spin it around a pole, we still experience only one 24-hour period per full 360-degree spin, not 4. Real physics and geometry treat the Earth's rotation as a continuous motion through time, measured consistently. One full rotation is about 23 hours, 56 minutes. Ray's 96 hours doesn't fit any conventional coordinate system. If we try to reconcile it, we run into contradictions. To claim 4 full days in one rotation, you'd have to redefine what you call a day. In standard math, the structure he's describing sounds like taking a single rotation and partitioning it into 4 conceptual corners, but then counting each corner permutation as if it were a separate day. It's as if he's using a 4-dimensional frame of reference, 4 coordinate axes of time, where really we only have 1 dimension for time in physics. We could liken it to a 4-cornered clock face that somehow ticks 4 times when the Earth turns once, but clocks don't behave that way. In group theory terms, if you treat each corner as an element in a cyclic group, C4, rotating 1/4 turn at a time, you cycle back to start after 4 steps. The math of that group doesn't multiply the number of days, it just goes in a loop of 4 states. And if you add another layer, say you lifted it into a 4D hypercube or a tesseract, that's very different from Ray's claim. His reference to a timecube might evoke 4 dimensions, 3 of space and 1 of time, but what he describes isn't the usual 4D space-time model. It's a different misapplication of cube geometry. For example, a physical cube has 8 corners and a certain symmetry group of 24 rotations. His 4 corners and 16 corners don't correspond to any standard cube shape. But plainly, the mathematics of Timecube diverges sharply from the math we use to describe real rotations and symmetries. In Earth's actual rotation, each point on Earth goes through 360 degrees each day, period. You might place 4 labels around the Earth, sun up, sundown, etc., but they're really just markers moving with the surface. They don't generate extra days. If we mapped Ray's idea onto real geometry, it's as though he took the concept of equidistant points on a circle and treated each quarter turn as if it created a whole new time frame. Real coordinate transforms, say switching from one time zone to another or rotating reference frames, don't produce extra time dimensions. Mathematicians might nod and say this sounds like taking a cyclic group of order 4 and then mistakenly interpreting one group operation as a new independent timeline, or comparing it to a dihedral symmetry, which includes flipping a square, and thinking flips add time. In sum, Ray's model felt to most mathematicians and scientists like a poetic misuse of terms. He saw cubes and squares and circles, 16 corners in a 3D rotation, but his belief was not about formal geometry as we know it. It was an allegory of higher-order lifetime, as he put it, imbued with meaning beyond conventional math. He firmly asserted that linear time was a cruel ignorance, that time is cubic, not linear, as stupid educators teach. Understanding Ray's writing style gives context to all this. He wrote like a prophet ranting to an invisible jury. The linguist in me notes patterns, long sentences with bursts of capitals and punctuation marks, self-coined terms, repetition of grand ideas. He used symmetry in language too, speaking of 1, 4, 16, layering concepts like his 4 corners and 16 points. There's a relentless internal logic. If you spend time reading, you see 4-corner days repeated thousands of times in slightly different garbled guises. Some have likened it to stream of consciousness. It's as if he decoded a secret code and turned it into English or something like that. His tone is urgent, almost confrontational, blaming a conspiracy of academia for hiding the truth. This forbidden knowledge framing, claiming that mainstream science is evil or incomplete, is pretty classic conspiracist psychology. It makes some readers feel they're getting the inside scoop, a truth that they don't want you to know. At the same time, his style is undeniably unique. It's so over the top that it became iconic. Fans of internet oddities started quoting his lines, calling his idea the harmonic prime, or making fun of the bold, colored text and frantic writing. Early meme communities reveled in it. The site's format, a single long page with no real headings, became part of the legend. It's why, when we talk about his writing, we don't just mention what he said, but how he said it. Linguists and psychologists might note that his phrasing is repetitive and aggressive. Words like stupid, cubic, shout at the reader. It comes off like a fever dream, but there's a method in it. For Ray, that was the voice of someone shouting down centuries of error. He played the outsider role fully, as if knowledge had been suppressed until he came along. So how did this polemic-born website turn into internet legend? In the early 2000s, the net was a wild place. There was no Twitter or Facebook, but sites like You're the Man Now, Dog, where users made looping image jokes, and forums like Reddit's precursors, Something Awful or The Well. Timecube fit right in with the culture of sharing weirdness. Students and tech nerds discovered Timecube.com and sent the link to each other by email and on bulletin boards. On forums and blogs, others would retype segments just because they were so confounding. By 2001, someone on a site called Everything 2 wrote a satirical piece imagining a world where Ray got the Nobel Prize. Something Awful published a spoof of a learning triangle theory, ridiculing corners. Even You're the Man Now, Dog had its versions. Think flashing text and some ominous music, exactly the kind of viral content mid-2000s kids loved. The word spread slowly. There wasn't an algorithm behind it, just genuine bafflement and fascination. College newspapers took note. MIT students booked Ray for a lecture in January 2002, an Independent Activities Period event. MIT's posters billed Timecube as the holy grail of physics, which tells you everything. In that packed lecture hall, a quiet Florida retiree stood by a flip chart and calmly explained his idea, repeating his $10,000 challenge. Students peppered him with questions, but he always circled back to his main points. 4 days, 4 corners. Later, a Georgia Tech student group held another talk. A filmmaker even made a short film called Above God about Ray in 2005. By the mid-2000s, Timecube.com was effectively archived, but alive in chat rooms and early video sites. There were fan sites, one called Cubic Awareness Online, and debates, like a digital campfire. This viral journey cemented Timecube's place as proto-internet folklore. It was one of the lost wonders of the World Wide Web, a testament to how an idea, however unconventional, could become communal lore. Younger generations on YouTube or TikTok might know Timecube only as a punchline, but to those who were there, it was serious, or at least utterly captivating. In those days before social media, sharing meant copying the URL into AIM, email, or LiveJournal. It was a kind of memetic storytelling. A friend would say, "Dude, check out Timecube," and you'd click, and like an urban legend, it grew. People even made t-shirts, custom cards, and jokes about it. This phenomenon shows how the internet took a fringe theory and turned it into culture. In a way, Ray's website became a source text that kids and geeks riffed on, a communal in-joke that also sparked genuine philosophical discussion. But behind the memes and math was a real man. Otis Eugene Ray was by many accounts kind-hearted but misunderstood. Descriptions from people who met him describe a frail old man with white hair, yet eyes burning with conviction. He was fiercely sincere. He genuinely believed he discovered something profound. And when no one took him seriously, it hurt him. He often mentioned feeling lonely, dismissed by scientists and society. That wisest man on earth bravado can read as arrogance, but it also seems like a shield for vulnerability. In interviews, he confessed he didn't seek internet fame. He had to speak up, because no writer or speaker understands the Timecube. as he once said on a tech TV interview. His mission was urgent to him, a kind of duty. The tragedy in Jean Ray's story is subtle. There was a passionate individual who poured decades into a personal theory that nearly everyone dismissed as nonsense. He was at times aggressive in language. We should remember he was not a cartoon villain, but a lonely retiree. He suffered a stroke in 2001, near the time of his MIT talk. Friends from the documentary later said he lived in almost complete isolation near Tallahassee, working on his websites until his death in 2015. He went to a church gift shop on occasion, greeted the cashier warmly, and chatted about normal things when asked. Which is to say, he was more than just Timecube. Those who got to know him a bit found a polite, if eccentric person. In 2015, Jean Ray passed away. His domain registration expired around then, so the site went dark, though archives survive. People wrote remembrances, some humorous, many respectful. One thing is clear, despite the outlandish content, Ray truly lived his truth. In the final analysis, perhaps the most human aspect of Timecube is that it wasn't an academic hoax or a marketing stunt. It was the singular expression of one man's worldview. That touches on the philosophical angle. Why do people cling to something like Timecube? I think it's part of a bigger pattern. We all have a hunger to feel like we see the world differently, to find hidden patterns no one else recognizes. Ray's theory promised a secret symmetry, a hidden dimension of time that nobody else acknowledges. For some, especially those who distrust mainstream knowledge or feel alienated by society, a hidden cosmic order idea is intoxicating. It gives life meaning as if the universe itself is shouting at them, and they alone can hear. Timecube uses familiar elements, sunrises, sunsets, seasons, and weaves them into a tapestry where the ordinary becomes cosmic. In that sense, it's not that different from mythologies or fringe cosmologies throughout history that reframe reality. And in the context of conspiracy culture, Ray's claims resonate. There is a specific us versus them vibe. He calls professors and scientists evil or stupid and claims they're suppressing his truth. That fits the classic conspiracy narrative and makes believers feel special and informed. But even beyond conspiracists, everyone has a soft spot for the wild, the unexplained. Timecube, as strange as it sounds, taps into that. It's as if the mathematics, circles and squares he obsessed over are symbols for something more, maybe chaos and order, or the tension between simplicity and complexity. We could see his 4 days as a metaphor, even if he meant it literally. There's a poetic quality in the idea that time isn't just a line but a shape, that every day has corners and cycles. That poetic sense is why some on the fringes might say there's a kernel of truth in it, as if acknowledging that any attempt to describe time in new ways is at least an attempt at understanding. Today, Timecube stands as a kind of symbol. It reminds us that the internet can amplify even the most eccentric theories, giving them life beyond their origin. It's part of the tapestry of outsider science and crank cosmologies. In internet culture, it's cited alongside alien memes and flat earth ideas as something that captured our collective imagination, if only to shrug and say, "What in the world did I just read?" But more deeply, Timecube's legacy is a cautionary tale and a conversation starter. It tells us about the late 90s and the early 2000s web, an unruly era where domain name pilgrims could discover literally anything. It also warns of how passionate individuals can wander into isolation with their grand theories, and it challenges us to look at the lonely figure behind the text. So what should future generations make of Timecube? Perhaps that it is at once a charming relic and a serious mirror. It reflects human creativity, the capacity to weave wild ideas into personal mythology and human psychology, our vulnerability to see patterns, whether they're there or not. It calls on us to be empathetic. Jean Ray believed fervently in what he was saying. In a different context, maybe some of that wonder could have been steered into science or art. But as it is, Timecube invites us to ponder why we hunger for hidden orders, why square wheels can feel poetic, and why a late-life theorist's lonely blog could become a cultural phenomenon. In the end, Timecube is as much about Jean Ray as it is about time. It's the story of a man who looked at the sunrise and the clock and felt that reality was shouting at him from the margins. Whether or not there's any truth in the four corners of his theory, the real lesson is that every legend, even an internet legend born in absurdity, has its human heart, and listening to that heart without ridicule can be strangely profound.